This man's name is Callum, and he was called by someone. That person asked Callum to meet right now. If not, the person will send Callum's disgrace video to his mother. On the way, Callum saw someone lying on the road and another person unconscious in the car. Callum, who is a coward, immediately called the police to report what he was seeing. Then, Callum went closer to the car and there, he found a woman unconscious in the car. But not long after that, suddenly, the next morning, the police started evacuating the crime scene last night. Here, there's a detective named John Luther. The police only found a dead woman, while Callum seemed to be kidnapped last night. Shortly, John was approached by Callum's mother, who immediately asked where her son was. John only replied that he and the police would continue trying to find Callum. Callum's mother asked John to promise that he would find her son and catch the culprit. Finally, John promised that he would definitely find Callum and catch the culprit. Moreover, incidents like this have been rife for the past 11 years. The next day, a man named Robbie orders someone to find John's fault and then exposes him to social media. Robbie apparently wants John to go to jail at any cost.
Want his shame.
A few days later, Robbie's plan finally worked. Now, John will be thrown in a prison for a case of vigilante, violence, and intimidating the defendants he arrested. Then, the scene moves to John, who is now being led into a cell. All the prisoners shout scorn at John, remembering that he used to be the police who were respected by criminals. There are some convicts who were caught by John, and now they hold a grudge against John. Several days in prison, John has received a lot of intimidation from the prisoners. Even when John was taking a shower, they approached him and beat him. On the other hand, Callum's mother got a call from a mysterious person who told her about Callum's whereabouts. So, she rushed to that place. There, it turned out that not only Callum's mother was called by the mysterious person, but there were also families of other kidnapping victims. When Callum's mother and the other victims' families entered the building, they were hysterical after seeing their sons and daughters who had been missing. Not long after that, suddenly the building caught fire, and as a result, Callum's mother and the other parents did not have time to bring their child. The next day, the police came to the crime scene, including the chief detective named Raina. In that house, Raina and his deputy were confused about what was the motive of the perpetrator for doing this. After processing the crime scene, Raina gathered her men to hold a meeting. Here, Raina said that one of the victims was a kidnapping victim 11 years ago. It means that the perpetrator had planned this all along.
It's been carefully planned and executed over a number of... Where were the bodies stored in the interim? Our killer must have known that. Let's find out how. Let's get to it.
Beside that, John, who was pensive in the cell, was suddenly handed a letter. When the letter was opened, it turned out that the number 65.8 was written inside. John realized what the numbers mean. The number indicates the frequency of the radio channel. When the radio in front of him is pointed at that frequency, there is a sound recording of Callum being finished off by the perpetrator. Then, the perpetrator also says that he is the person who has put John in jail. It means Robbie is the perpetrator from this serial killer.
But you didn't see me, because that is who you are.
On the other hand, Robbie himself is seen approaching his wife. And it turns out that Robbie's wife was a victim of a fire incident 11 years ago. But here, we still don't know if everything Robbie did was for revenge or not. Then, Robbie showed a video when he killed his victims, but his wife looked displeased with what Robbie had done. The next day, John was visited by Callum's mother. She wants to claim a promise from John, who promises to catch the culprit. She also tells John how her son was brutally killed. Hearing this, John immediately felt guilty, and he was determined to catch the culprit no matter what.
You can help.
Karen, wait.
It turned out that Robbie was the one who escorted Callum's mother. Here, Callum's mother thanks Robbie for accompanying her, even though they had just met. In his cell, John tried to find a phone which had previously been smuggled. Then, John contacted his friend for help. John asked his friend to release him when he was transferred to another prison. Initially, his friend refused, but because John kept begging, in the end he wanted to help John.
Look.
That evening, John made a fuss in the prison by beating the inmates who had a grudge against him, and it made the whole prison chaotic. John also tried to fight the wardens, until finally he was arrested. Because of his actions, John would transfer to another prison. On the way, the warden who took John was suddenly mugged and then beaten up by a group of people. Then, John was moved into their car. It turned out that the mugger was none other than John's friend. The next day, John begins his investigation by finding a radio station that has a frequency of 65.8. On the other hand, Raina met Martin, John's ex-boss. Raina asked Martin to help her catch John. Raina doesn't want John to mess up her investigation, because it seems the reason John ran away was because he was obsessed with catching the culprit. Return to John, who at this time had just arrived at the radio broadcasting site. When John met the radio announcer, the man instead ran away. Fortunately, John was able to arrest the man. John started to interrogate the man and asked who was broadcasting on channel 65.8. The frightened radio announcer said that the broadcast was not live, but through a flash drive sent by someone. Then, John asked what was the reason the radio announcer wanted to obey the perpetrator. The radio announcer replied that he met the perpetrator via the internet. Over time, they got closer, until the radio announcer wanted to tell his disgrace. All this disgrace was recorded by the perpetrator and then used to catfish the radio announcer. The perpetrator threatened to spread it to everyone if he didn't obey the orders. The radio announcer wasn't sure who the bad guy was, but he had his number. Finally, John took the radio announcer's phone to find the whereabouts of the perpetrator. After leaving, John tried to contact Martin. John knew that Martin must have joined the police to arrest him. But before that, John wanted to ask for help to trace the phone number of the perpetrator through the police system.
Doubt there'll be much of an argument for a... Doesn't matter how, but the number won't be good to you lot, not yet.
Well, actually, old fucker yet.
I'm consulting, yeah.
Then, Martin discussed with Raina and the others, and Martin suggested that Raina give the location of the perpetrators to John so that when John and the perpetrator were at the same location point, they could easily catch the two of them.
We'd have to go in heavy.
That night, John had already found the perpetrator's location, and he immediately went there. John tried to contact the perpetrator using a cell phone that he had stolen from the radio announcer. In the end, John managed to find Robbie, the perpetrator. Unfortunately, Robbie took someone hostage, stopping John's steps. Meanwhile, Raina and the police tried to arrest the two of them, but suddenly several people fell from the top of the building, which immediately caused chaos. Robbie saw John off guard, so he immediately tried to escape. But John continues to chase him until in a tunnel. Finally, John manages to find Robbie, and they fight each other. John had a cut in his stomach, but he continued to hold on until he was able to paralyze Robbie. But suddenly, the police came to arrest them both. In the end, John and Robbie chose to run away. After successfully escaping, Robbie immediately contacted someone in the police, and the person is Sui B, the deputy detective. Here, Robbie asks Sui B to get rid of John immediately, because if not, he will spread Sui B's immoral videos to his family. It turns out that the people Robbie took advantage of were people who confided in him on the internet, until he found out about their disgrace, and then took advantage of them. 30 minutes later, John tried to call Martin, and then ordered him to turn on the loudspeaker. John said that the victims probably only met the perpetrator via the internet. The criminal pretends to be a friend to confide in, then takes advantage of the victim's shame to blackmail them, as experienced by the radio announcer. According to John, the fear of being humiliated is stronger than the fear of death, as felt by people who jump from the top of the building.
To make them come to him.
The scene moves to a teenager named Anya, who is in the house alone. Not long after that, there was someone who called her. It turned out to be Robbie, who wanted to kidnap her. At the police station, Martin just discovered the fact that what John had previously told was true. Based on information obtained from the victims' phones, almost all of them knew the perpetrator through the internet. The perpetrator introduced himself to the victims by different names, but he once told his victims that his wife had experienced a fire incident at Eccleston Square Hotel 11 years ago. Raina immediately checked the fire incident, and finally, she found that the perpetrator was Robbie. At the same time, suddenly Raina was contacted by Robbie. He sends a video of Anya being tortured, and surprisingly, it turns out that Anya is Raina's daughter. Here, Robbie threatened to kill Anya if Raina did not want to take John within 24 hours. For fear of this threat, Raina also secretly contacted John. Raina said that she would not catch him as long as he wanted to meet her. Raina also said that they had to work together to catch the perpetrator. In short, Raina and John met. Here, Raina explained that the perpetrator was Robbie, and his wife had an accident at a hotel 11 years ago. Raina asked John to meet Robbie's wife, but when they were going to the car, John already had a feeling that Raina wanted to catch him. So, John tried to ask how Robbie could threaten her. Then, Raina says that Robbie has kidnapped her daughter, and she doesn't want anything bad to happen to her daughter. John tried to explain to Raina by saying that Robbie would still finish Anya off, even though Raina complied with all of Robbie's orders. The thing they had to do was catch Robbie before Raina's daughter was finished off. In the end, Raina realized and rushed to meet Robbie's wife. Once there, Raina and John beg Robbie's wife to tell them where Robbie is now and what his real motive is. Robbie's wife told them that Robbie used to be addicted to the internet, so that he often ignored his wife. Therefore, Robbie's wife asked for a divorce. But because of that, Robbie actually had the heart to burn his own wife 11 years ago. After that incident, Robbie turned into a psychopath. Even in the past month, Robbie has kidnapped dozens of people to make videos. Robbie's wife also said that Robbie was now heading to Norway. Raina immediately returned home to prepare a passport while John contacted Martin. John again asked for help from Martin.
Where is it? Let's check your text.
Subi, who knew that Raina was going to Norway, immediately reported it to Robbie. Here, Robbie was sure that the person who had leaked this was none other than his wife. So, Robbie asked Subi to finish off his wife, and Robbie promised not to bother Subi again.
I just want you to do this one to make sure she doesn't speak to anyone else. There's only one person that could have led DCI Rain.
Then, when Subi arrived at Robbie's wife's place, he was shocked because there were already Martin and some of the police there. Martin now knew that Subi had been conspiring with the perpetrator. It turned out that John had previously asked Martin for help to look after Robbie's wife. Subi, who was more afraid that his shame would be spread by Robbie, prefers to die. The scene moves to John and Raina, who are now heading to a place that was previously said by Robbie's wife. They had to walk because it is not possible to pass by car. While walking, John accidentally sees a pile of frozen corpses. Arriving at a big house, Raina was immediately hysterical when she saw her daughter's body hanging with the other victims. Meanwhile, John preferred to look for Robbie. Raina finally realized that it was not her daughter's body, but suddenly Raina was attacked by Robbie's man. On the other hand, John was finally paralyzed by Robbie, who suddenly appeared from behind. After that, they were gathered because Robbie was going to broadcast live to his followers. It turns out that all this time, Robbie has been getting money from viewers who visited his dark website. Robbie did this as a hobby, as well as a way to earn a lot of money. Here, Robbie asks Raina to do something if she wants her daughter to survive. Then, now it's John's turn to do something to Raina, with the threat that they will all be finished if John does not obey Robbie's order.
I didn't expect either of you to pitch up this evening. Good girl.
When John will do something, he realizes that this would only make Robbie even crazier. John told the audience that the police would trace their IP address, so that those watching would definitely be arrested. Hearing the threat, the audience became frightened and immediately turned off the connection. Then, John tries to intimidate Robbie by playing on his psyche. John knew that Robbie was a coward and had an anxiety disorder. John knew that from Robbie's wife.
What a sweaty actress. What is wrong? He's doing it now. You can't see it from where you are, but he's grinding. He's still doing it. Is that what she said?
That's what she said.
Not only that, she told the police where this... Yeah, she's a liar.
All of John's words succeeded in influencing Robbie, and he finally left the place. John tried to untangle Raina. Then he chased Robbie before the door was locked. While chasing Robbie, it turned out that there were a lot of hostages who had been kidnapped by Robbie. However, Robbie managed to get out and then tried to escape using his car. At the same time, John getting into the car and trying to stop Robbie. On the other side, Raina and her daughter are still locked in the room, and now they are fighting with Robbie's man. Back to John and Robbie, who are now trying to paralyze each other, until the car they are driving is mired in broken ice. John continues to hold Robbie to prove who is the strongest among them. At the same time, Martin and the police came. They finally saved John, while Robbie froze to death. Besides that, Raina and her daughter also survived by successfully killing Robbie's man. Raina thanks John, but John is still a fugitive and will return to prison. In short, before John returned to prison, he got treatment for the injuries he had. Not long after, Martin came saying that John would not return to prison because there was a group of people who wanted John to carry out a mission. They seemed interested in John for his actions. When John approaches the leader, the movie ends. It means there will be a continuation of this movie.